In this video, we're going to take a look at anti-slip texture. Now, this is a fairly common texture. We see this a lot now on civilian and military vehicles. It's used to help prevent falls and slipping when working on or climbing over vehicles. This texture is also very commonly seen on Israeli vehicles, especially the Merkava. Once we get inside the box, we find a bottle of cement, and then a second bottle, which is the anti-slip texture or sand. And take a look at that, and it's a very fine texture there, very fine grit sand, very much in scale. Well, let's get started with this. I have a piece of cardstock here, just a scrap piece of plastic, and on that I'm going to apply some of the cement. Just squirt it straight from the bottle, and then with an old brush, I'll just smooth it out over the surface evenly. I have found that the glue dries fairly quickly, so you want to work in small areas. Once I have laid down an area of glue, then I'll come back in with the sand, just use the bottle to shake it over the surface, trying to be somewhat uniform with the application, but uniformity is not necessarily something that we see all the time in real life anyway. And because we're working in smaller sections because of the drying time of the glue, it's easy just to come back in and continue the process. So repeat by laying down some glue, spreading it out with the brush, we'll come back in with the sand, drop that over the top, and you can see it would take very little time at all before your entire model could be completely textured. Well, now that we have the basics understood, let's do this application on something that's a little bit more comparable to actual modeling. I've laid out a piece of plastic card here. I've painted this plastic card. I would not recommend that. If you do use the anti-slip texture, do it on bare plastic before painting. So of course, on civilian and military vehicles alike, we find references that have anti-slip texture only in certain areas, where other areas are still left with bare metal. Well, we could try to carefully paint those areas with the cement, but I think a better solution here is to use some masking tape. With some random shapes cut from the tape, I'll just apply these over the sample surface here, just to give us something to work with. Of course, in our modeling, we can imagine all sorts of different scenarios where we would need crisp lines around surface details in order to mask off the anti-slip texture. With the masking tape now in place, we can start adding our surface texture. Begin with just a few drops of the cement. Again, we're working in small areas here. Distribute the cement evenly in this area, going up to and slightly over the edges of the masking tape. Once the glue is evenly distributed, then we can go ahead and apply the sand texture. And as recommended, we're going to be working in small areas, so the process is simply repeated. Adding cement, distributing the cement with the brush, adding the sand texture, and then continue the process until your model is complete. As mentioned earlier, it's best to apply this anti-slip texture on raw plastic prior to painting or priming. So I have just a small part here that we'll also take through the process and check on the results. We've allowed the glue to dry for approximately 20 minutes, and that's been more than enough time. And now it's time to pull off the masking. As you can see, it comes off fairly easily. And part of the reason is as I applied the glue, of course, I just came up to the edges and just slightly over the edges of the masking tape. Again, no need to use the glue over the top of areas that we're not putting texture. As you can see, the results are quite nice. We have texture in certain areas, and we have clean surfaces in others with a nice tight edge. It can be somewhat difficult to see the results on a test card, so I've gone ahead and painted this in a sort of a random NATO type camouflage over the top of the texture so we can see the results under paint. And here's our small test piece, that fender on the naked plastic that we did, the preferred method. Either way, the results are quite good. There are areas of clean, there are areas of texture with nice crisp edges. And finally, just as one more example, this is another piece of cardstock where I've added the texture prior to painting and then given everything just a nice shade of desert yellow. And here we can see the texture on one side and the clean texture on the other. In the end, many civilian and military vehicles alike use the anti-slip texture, and so this is a very easy and effective solution in order to recreate what we see in the real world and in our references.